Wuhan is not far now. The Indian Prime Minister is on his way to the central Chinese city. He is expected to land in a couple of hours from now. Meanwhile, the Chinese president has made his way over to the city already. He arrived earlier today. Now, the two men will spend the next 2 days together, engaging in an informal dialogue. But they could come away from the summit armed with the methods and means to determine the future course of the Sino-India relationship. Preparations to welcome the Indian Prime Minister to Wuhan are on in full swing. Earlier today, WION paid a visit to the hotel where Mr. Modi will stay during his visit. Security has naturally been stepped up in light of this all-important summit. But before he left for China, Mr. Modi issued a statement saying that he hopes to discuss a range of bilateral issues of global importance with the Chinese leader. Now, despite the informal nature of the summit, both leaders are expected to spend a considerable amount of time with each other. They'll first meet tomorrow afternoon at the East Lake Guest House, from where they're expected to head out on a walk together. Then, later in the evening, President Xi will host a dinner for the Indian Prime Minister. Come Saturday, April 28th, which is the last day of these talks, both leaders are expected to have lunch together and take a boat ride on the East Lake. But the possibility of a reset in India and China ties has unsettled Pakistan. It's feeling the heat, and Islamabad has issued a statement saying that the friendship between China and Pakistan is time-tested. And with me on the broadcast from Wuhan is Gaurav Sharma. He's a journalist based out of China. Gaurav, good evening. Thanks for joining us here on Gravitas. How exactly is the city of Wuhan and China at large viewing this visit by Prime Minister Modi?
See, there's an air of optimism in China, and recent half 2 hour, in the evening, PLA issued a statement. PLA, which has been very, very acerbic when it comes to its tone against China, against India, and in fact, during the Doklam crisis, PLA was very, very upfront and did not mince any words against India. And actually, today, the senior colonel of PLA also has said that India and China can improve their military ties under the guidance and guidelines set by Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So it's something which is very, very positive. This is the latest development which has happened 2 hours ago in Beijing. So so there's a lot of optimism in China, and so China and India both seem to be very, very gung-ho about the informal summit which is going to take place from tomorrow.
Right, and despite the emphasis on the word informal, Gaurav, can the outcomes of this meeting, though, have far-reaching implications when it comes to the ties between these two countries?
Of course. If you say that this informal, this informal meeting will have no outcome on Sino-Indian relationship, it would be absolutely unfair. So there will be outcome, but the only thing is that both sides have decided to not to go public with the outcome or whatever comes out of this informal summit, quote unquote. So this is going to have far-reaching impact on Sino-Indian relationship, and both the sides have already said that they are not only going to discuss the bilateral issues, but also beyond that. So there is a North Korean issue. You never know what comes up in the meeting, and America is also has become withdrawn, and it has also withdrawn from the climate change treaty, and there's a trade war. And it has its own protectionist trade policy. So these are the issues which will come up. So you have to see a larger picture when these two leaders meet. They are the fastest growing economies in the world, and in fact, the GDP of India was better than China in the last quarter. So you have to see, and how China has been emphasizing that we are giving importance to India, not because we have a border dispute with it, because of its emerging status on the international landscape.
Right. Gaurav, thank you for joining us this evening with that perspective from Wuhan. We'll, of course, be keeping a close track of everything that takes place in the central Chinese city starting from tomorrow. The summit, of course, has attracted the attention of policy hawks and the media around the world. So here's a taste of what the Chinese media is saying about the Modi-Xi meeting, something that Gaurav also hinted at a short while back. Now, an opinion piece in the China Daily calls the meeting a new landmark in China-India relations, adding that it will infuse fresh vigor into bilateral ties. Referring to the ancient relationship that the two countries share, The article called the meeting's intention itself indicative of how the two leaders care for the future of humankind. The Global Times, which liberally employed shrill tones to attack India during the Doklam standoff, seems to have had a change of heart as well. It's been running a series of posts on the Wuhan meeting, striking an optimism tone. The newspaper termed the meeting significant. One piece went on to claim that hostility towards India is being replaced by a hope for friendly ties. When it comes to the South China Morning Post, it carried a piece on the possible agenda for the talks, taking into account the changing US-China ties. The article called the meeting a major course correction and a significant geopolitical shift. Meanwhile, China's official broadcaster, the China Global Television Network or CGTN, carried a story on the previous visits made by the Indian Prime Minister to the country. The story went on to suggest that the informal meeting will help in deepening mutual trust between the two leaders and that it could open up new prospects for bilateral ties.